like
assumption
to
for
point
assigning design.
out to you where I saw that I saw a man knew exactly what that airplane weighed and what he was getting out of it. He knew just what the ship of the sea weighed. But he doesn't think about buildings in terms of weight. He thinks of them sort of as fortresses.
Yes.
The bigger and heavier and higher, the more secure. I saw then, because he was putting his science only on the airplane and so forth as a weapon, did he do that. But he assumed that man wasn't going to be successful. So there's no use in spending our wealth on the people because they're going to be flop anyway.
Malthusian
So
kind of.
I saw that if we really turned it on what are called livery.
Yes.
I needed a term like weaponry.
Yes.
Livery. Then, which would mean environment controls, shells, the apparatus inside to clean us and prepare food, and conserve and handle the energies. I then went into that, and that brought about the discovery of the geodesic domes and so forth, and now over 100,000 around the world.
Yes.
And I now really know that I can give you, for instance, 30 buildings for one, for a given snow load, hurricane loading, earthquake loading, for a given clear span. I can give you 30 buildings for one against any alternate known engineering strategy than spherical and triangulated 10th degree structures.
Yes,
so that I now know by actual measurement of what technology you do need to make man a success. I now know it's highly feasible. We have the resources, we have the knowledge. The metals have not been lost of in mind. They simply come out and get metal melted out to take one Cadillac, melt it up, and get out 2 Japanese cars. Twice as good. So that what we keep circulating, I now know with the resources we already mined, the knowledge we already have, it's highly feasible to take care of all of humanity at a higher standard than anyone's ever known. And it can be done by 1985. In fact, in this very room we're in here today, we're just going over the last World Game workshop that's been going on for the last month. And the team really did undertake to absolutely certify all those figures I just gave you. And we now know actually the critical path of how we phase out the fossil fuels burning, how we phase out the nuclear, how we do bring in the wind power, how we do bring in the hydrogen powers and so forth. And it actually can be done by 1985. I knew that because I've made the measurements before. Now I have really a large team and been able to certify this, so it's going to become a public matter fairly rapidly. But again, please note that I only was able to do what I did because it was of the times. Things had to be ripe.
That's right.
Nature has a gestation rate.
That's right.
And I'm really very eager that never appear that I think I'm something fancy to do something. I simply, really by very good luck, happen to be that exile at that moment to take inventory, having fortunately had enough experience in ships and airplanes and building of buildings and so forth, to realize it was so. Everybody's really familiar with that in electronics of the great big radio set down to the little transistor and so forth. Where today, I like to use the example, one communication satellite weighing 1/4 of a ton is outperforming the transoceanic communication capability of 175,000 tons of copper cable.
That's right.
Now, that's the rate of gain of the more or less thing is not just one Cadillac into 2 Japanese, but very exponential rate. I'd like to be sure that we recognize and to whatever extent we are disseminating information, that how reasonable it is that yesterday man being ignorant and being very hungry and not knowing even what he could eat, just a very pick I find this poisons him and so forth, that it has been a logical working assumption that there's nowhere nearly enough ground because when people did find a lucky place, then they got a flood came and a drought, one of those things, and they tried to invade. So man has always been warring and coming on.
The nightmare.
So we do have absolutely universal to economics and to political economics is the model that there's fundamental inadequacy, fundamental scarcity. Therefore, all politics are based on the fact that there's not enough to go around. Someday a whole lot of people are going to die, and I have a theory, and my theory is the fairest, I think, and the wisest and the most economical. Therefore, you better join up with me, and your family better join up with me. That's why I have a politician. Now, realize then you're going to have a showdown, see, the result of CB may be enough for you, so we join up sides, and then we're going to have the great Armageddon, see which of the great world sides are going to win, the communists or the capitalists, what it may be. It's not that way. Having discovered there really is enough to go around, I then find then that politics are really now obsolete. People are so used to the idea, I can have a leader. They also had to have a leader when we were illiterate. We didn't have words, we didn't have the communication, we didn't have the information. Suddenly everybody, once there was just the pharaohs in on the information, and the nobles were, then the middle class. just this century, everybody's suddenly in on their French. Everybody's in the vocabulary. Everybody can communicate. So suddenly, it is really going to be everybody, and everybody's going to have to know in a hurry that there really is enough to go around. Now, if there is enough to go around, and you and I know there is, you and I don't need a politician to tell us how to make sense as we sit here. He doesn't have to, politician tell you, now it's your turn to speak. You and I cooperate and try to bring out the information in a logical way.
Yes.
And society just does not do that. Anyway, we're not used to that. We're used to the idea not to, so we'll elect you, and it's up to you to be sure that our side comes out on top. Now, and that's why all the flag waving and all the guns and everything are out there. But it's just no longer, it's actually no longer so. Now this is what, we're up against either a bloody revolution ahead, thinking it has to be you and me with all the bombing capability, $200 billion a year being spent to get ready for Armageddon by the leading nations of the earth. I say we're going to have either a revolution of blood where everybody loses then, or it's going to be a design revolution where we do use the ephemeral, we do more than less, we do get all of humanity successful by 1985. It's a very touch and go matter. Therefore, to me, I take very deep sense of responsibility that you and I are invited to be on the air to communicate with a number of people. Therefore, I say the most important thing is how do we get all of humanity to find out what it is all about in the shortest possible time. That man does have the option to make it. He didn't know it, but now he has. Our responsibility is to enlighten, elucidate, not ask anybody to believe, but show them why it is so that there now can be enough to realize then that as the evolution, however, is at work, and you and I didn't invent that universe. We didn't invent that planet. We didn't invent those laws. There's something much bigger operating. The thing to do is to stand off and try to see what those are. Now, the things that are happening evolutionarily, we have politics everywhere. With the information system we have today, are becoming quite clearly highly corruptible. They're perfectly good human beings, but thinking's not enough to go around. Then playing tricks. How do you get? Well, you don't want to really kill the other man, but if you tell a lie, it's immoral if you do it for yourself, but it's moral if you do it to the people who love all those kind of ways of temporizing with the truth. And man has been doing that. So poor little man, I see the politicians are now in such a bind.
Mr. Nixon, for instance.
Well, whatever it is, we don't have to say that. It's quite clear that politics are corruptible, that you can't get an office without buying it and all those things.
More or less the way the country is set up.
No, but this was always true, you see. But now it's out in the open. So therefore we have a young world that's becoming disillusioned with the idea that how you get to solve problems is by politics. They're beginning to really say, how does the universe work? I see if we can get to the moon and not lose a single human being on that kind of undertaking, and it takes millions. That's what we ought to be doing about how do we make our spaceship work. So there's a young world coming through, and I find that absolutely will not put up with lies. It's manifest of its abhorrence of any misrepresentation is most cheering of all the news we have.
That's not a generalized principle.
And each child is very much better informed than the ones before. Because when I was young, I was 8 years old when the Wright brothers flew, and up to the time, everybody said it's inherently impossible for man to fly. I was brought up under an incredible amount of misinformation, radio to get rid of. But these young people they're not all found with misinformation. They really learn. They say, I see Daddy and Mama listening to the radio too. Daddy used to be authority. He brought the news home, but he doesn't bring the news home anymore. They see that Daddy isn't the authority. Therefore, he's also emanating the voice of the people on the TV or the radio. And the kids are saying, I see then that Dad and Mom are not the authority. I love them very much. They love me, but I got to do my own thinking. This is the first generation saying, I'm going to do my own thinking. This is the great change. If we do survive, it's because man is using his mind, is doing his own thinking, and not leaving it to somebody else. First place, if you're vindictive,
you shouldn't be vindictive,
or you're trying to revenge and so forth, you're not making any contribution at all. You've got to understand. In fact, I really feel very often sick in my heart about the poor politicians who are having the function historically of demonstrating that politics are corrupt.
I think the sooner that they could be
very sad matter. I feel that I'm going to have to interrupt because I feel that we're going to have to, in order for those metals to recirculate. For instance, Japan has no iron mines. They become one of the great industrial countries because the United States put so much armaments in the Pacific. They simply able to melt up those armaments, and there was their mine. In other words, Japan's economy goes on entirely on recirculating scrap. Now, this is absolutely new. Man used to think of metals as being used up like strawberries, that they simply got eaten up. Not so. They just do not get lost. And so we find every time we recirculate those metals, we have this higher, much more know-how. Therefore, we're able to increase that, doing more with less. Now, I feel then, it's very, the whole idea of separate nations in countries was it had to be you and me.
Yeah, that's a scarcity assumption.
And if it's going to really work, it's going to be because we have to absolutely become transcendental. But I find all the great corporations have now become transnational, and the great ideologies, but only the people stuck back where they can be conscripted and taxed and so forth, rather than being able to really get to be world citizens. So we're going to have to see all the sovereignties are going to have to go in the next 10 years, next 12 years, if we're going to make it. And so that's quite evolution has quite a schedule of things that are going to become obsolete. And it's going to have to come, the going away of those nations and so forth becomes not something I said done away with because you don't like it, but simply because it becomes irrelevant. And just simply